Part 1. The ship came out of hyperspace with a soft hum, and Jake Monroe pressed his face close to the observation window like a child seeing snow for the first time. Before him floated Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Council. It was a planet covered in crystal towers that caught the light of 3 distant suns and scattered it into a million colors. Ships of every shape and size moved around it like fish swimming around a coral reef. "It's beautiful," Vance said from behind him. She was holding her tablet close to her chest, her knuckles white from gripping it too hard. She was nervous, and Jake could not blame her. Admiral Ben Harper stood near the door with his arms crossed. He did not look at the planet. His eyes moved across the inside of the ship, checking systems and counting crew members out of old habit. He was a military man, and military men did not get distracted by pretty lights. "Remember why we're here," Ben said. His voice was low and rough. "They invited us because they want something. Never forget that." Jake turned away from the window and straightened his diplomatic robes. They were heavy and uncomfortable, designed by people on Earth who had never worn formal clothes in their lives. But appearances mattered today. Everything mattered today. "I know why we're here, Ben," Jake said. "We're here because humanity has finally been noticed, and now we have to prove we deserve a seat at the table." The ship docked at a massive station that orbited the planet. The docking bay alone was larger than most cities on Earth. Creatures of every kind walked through it, some on 2 legs, some on 4, some on none at all. Jake saw beings made of light, beings made of stone, beings that seemed to exist only as clouds of colored gas. The galaxy was stranger and more wonderful than he had ever imagined. A group of tall, snake-like creatures waited for them at the end of the ramp. Their scales were deep blue, and they wore robes made of golden thread. The one in front was larger than the others, and when it spoke, its voice was like music and thunder mixed together. "Welcome, humans of Earth," the creature said. "I am High Speaker of the people. On behalf of the 312 species of the Galactic Council, I greet you." Jake bowed his head in the way he had been taught. "High Speaker, I am Ambassador Jake Monroe. This is my Vance and Fleet Admiral Ben Harper. We are honored to be here." Looked at them with eyes that had no pupils, just swirling pools of gold. Jake had the uncomfortable feeling that the alien could see right through him. "Come," said. "The council is eager to meet the newcomers." They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. Other species moved past them, and Jake noticed how they looked at the humans. Some were curious, some were confused, many were something else, something that looked a lot like pity. The council chamber was the largest room Jake had ever seen. It was shaped like a bowl, with thousands of seats rising up in circles toward a ceiling so high it disappeared into mist. Every seat was filled with representatives from different worlds. The noise of their conversations was like the roar of an ocean. Led them to a small platform at the very bottom of the bowl. There were 3 chairs waiting for them, simple and plain compared to the elaborate thrones that surrounded them. "You will wait here," said. "When your name is called, you will speak. You will answer the questions of the council. You will accept their judgment." Then the High Speaker slithered away to take his own seat, a massive golden throne that floated above all the others. Leaned close to Jake. "Did you notice how he said that? Accept their judgment, not discuss, not negotiate, accept." "I noticed," Jake said quietly. The session began with rituals that went on for hours. Species Jake had never heard of made speeches about treaties signed 1,000 years ago. Votes were taken on matters that seemed to have nothing to do with Earth. The humans sat and waited and tried not to fall asleep. Finally, near the end of what Jake guessed was the local evening, raised one long arm. "We now address the matter of Earth," the High Speaker announced. "The young species known as humans has requested membership in the Galactic Council." A ripple of sound moved through the chamber. Jake stood up and walked to the speaking platform, a small circle in the center of the bowl where all eyes could see him. "Honored members of the council," Jake began. "Humanity is grateful for this opportunity. We are young compared to most of you. We have only been traveling among the stars for 300 years. But in that time, we have learned much. We have built a civilization that spans 40 worlds. We have developed technologies that we believe could benefit all species. We come to you not as beggars, but as partners. We offer our friendship, our knowledge, and our hope for a shared future." The silence that followed was long, then spoke again. "The Council has reviewed humanity's application. We have studied your history, your culture, your capabilities. We have reached a decision." Jake felt his heart beating hard in his chest. "Humanity will be granted provisional membership," said. "This means you will have no voting rights for a period of 100 cycles. You will pay tribute to the Council in the form of resources and labor. You will not expand beyond your current territory. You will submit your technology for review and approval. These are the terms. Do you accept?" Jake looked back at and Ben's face was pale. Ben's face was stone. "High Speaker," Jake said carefully, "these terms seem restrictive. Perhaps we could discuss." "There is no discussion," interrupted. "These are the terms given to all young species. You may accept them or you may leave." The chamber was silent. Every alien eye was watching, waiting. Jake thought about the years of work that had led to this moment. The dreams of billions of people back on Earth. The hope that humanity would finally take its place among the stars. He thought about what it would mean to walk away. "We accept," Jake said. The words felt like ashes in his mouth. Smiled, if that was what his expression could be called. Then, "Welcome to the Galactic Council, humans. We look forward to a long and productive relationship." As Jake walked back to his seat, he passed close to Ben Harper. The Admiral's lips barely moved, but Jake heard his words clearly. "Remember this moment. Remember how they looked at us. Remember everything." Jake sat down and looked up at the thousands of species, who now claimed authority over his people. "I will," he whispered. "I will, Part 2. 18 months passed, and humanity proved itself useful. Jake Monroe had stopped counting the number of times alien species had come to the human delegation with problems they could not solve. They had a disease that was killing their young. Human doctors studied it for 3 weeks and developed a cure. A race of beings who lived in the hearts of dying stars needed a new way to harvest energy. Human engineers gave them one. The crystalline minds, ancient artificial intelligences who had forgotten how to create art, came to human painters and writers and musicians. They left with tears in their eyes, or what passed for eyes among beings made of pure light. Vance kept records of everything, every cure, every invention, every song. She filled database after database with proof of humanity's value. "They're starting to notice us," she told Jake one evening in their quarters. "Really notice us. I've heard representatives from a dozen species talking about how impressive humans are, how creative, how adaptable." Jake nodded, but he did not smile. "I've heard the same things, and I've heard something else, fear." Ben Harper was sitting in the corner, cleaning a weapon that the council had forbidden him to carry. He carried it anyway. "Fear is the right word. We're making them nervous. Every problem we solve makes them wonder what else we can do." "Is that a bad thing?" asked. "It depends," Ben said, "on what they decide to do about it." The answer came 2 weeks later. Jake was walking through the diplomatic quarter when he noticed something strange. Species that had smiled at him yesterday now looked away. Doors that had been opened to him were suddenly closed. Conversations stopped when he approached. He found waiting for him in their meeting room, her face white as paper. "They're calling a special session," she said. "The whole council tomorrow." "About what?" Handed him her tablet. Jake read the words on the screen, and he felt the floor drop away beneath his feet. "The Containment Accord." It was written in careful diplomatic language, but the meaning was clear. Humanity was growing too fast, learning too quickly, developing technology at a rate that made older species uncomfortable. The Accord proposed a series of restrictions that would limit human expansion, control human research, and require all human inventions to be shared with the Council before they could be used. In simple terms, Earth would become a resource, a factory, a colony in everything but name. "Who proposed this?" Jake asked. His voice was very quiet. "The Dominion. They've been pushing it for months, apparently. They have support from over 200 species." Jake knew they were a warrior race, covered in hard shells and sharp edges. They had conquered a dozen worlds before joining the Council, and they still looked at every other species as either a threat or a meal. They had been watching humanity with cold, calculating eyes from the very beginning. "Can we stop it?" Jake asked. Shook her head slowly. "It's already been decided. The session tomorrow is just a formality. They'll vote and the Accord will pass, and there's nothing we can do about it." That night, Jake could not sleep. He stood at the window of his quarters and looked out at the crystal towers of Prime. They were beautiful in the starlight, shimmering with colors that had no names in any human language. He had believed in this place. He had believed that if humanity proved its worth, they would be accepted as equals. He had believed that the galaxy was better than the small, cruel world of his ancestors. He had been a fool. The session the next day was a nightmare. Jake stood at the speaking platform and made every argument he could think of. He spoke of partnership. He spoke of friendship. He spoke of the contributions humanity had made in just 18 months. He begged. He pleaded. He offered to accept new terms, harsher terms, anything that would preserve some measure of humanity's freedom. The Council listened politely, then they voted. The numbers appeared on screens around the chamber: 287 in favor, 25 against. It was not even close. High Speaker smiled down at Jake from his floating throne. "The Containment Accord is now law. Humanity will comply with its terms within 100 cycles or face sanctions." Jake stood frozen at the platform. He could feel the eyes of 300 species looking at him, waiting to see what the primitive humans would do. Some looked bored. Some looked satisfied. A very few, looked sorry. He walked back to his seat without speaking. Ben Harper was already on his feet, his hand moving toward the weapon hidden under his coat. Jake shook his head slightly, and Ben stopped. Was crying. She was trying to hide it, but Jake could see the tears running down her face. "I recorded everything," she whispered. "Every vote, every face, every word." "Good," Jake said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, dead, empty. "We'll need it." That night, the three of them sat in their quarters and said nothing for a long time. The weight of what had happened was too heavy for words. Finally, Ben spoke. "They sent a fleet. While we were sitting in that chamber listening to speeches, they sent 200 warships toward Earth. I just received word from home." His hands flew to her mouth. "No, they can't. The Accord hasn't even taken effect yet." "They're not waiting for the Accord," Ben said grimly. "They never were. The vote was just a distraction. By the time it passed, their ships would already be in our system. They planned to present the Accord as a done deal with Earth already under their control." Jake looked at the Admiral. "You said they sent a fleet, past tense." A small, cold smile appeared on Ben's face. It was not a pleasant smile. "They sent a fleet," he repeated. "They did not arrive." "What happened to them?" "I don't know yet. But I know that our people knew they were coming, and I know that we've been preparing for something like this for a very long time." Jake stood up and walked to the window one more time. The crystal towers were still beautiful, but now they looked different. Now they looked like a cage. "Request a formal session," he said. "Tell the Council we wish to respond to the Accord." "They'll expect us to surrender," said. Jake turned to face his team. His eyes were hard now, harder than they had ever been. "Let them expect whatever they want," he said. They've made their choice, now we make ours, Part 3. The council chamber had never been so full. Representatives from every member species had come to watch humanity's response to the containment accord. They filled every seat and stood in the aisles and crowded around the viewing screens in the hallways outside. Some had traveled for weeks to be here. They did not want to miss the moment when the young, foolish humans finally learned their place. High Speaker sat on his floating throne and looked down at the empty speaking platform with satisfaction. He had already prepared his speech of acceptance. It was a good speech, full of kind words about humanity's potential and gentle reminders about the wisdom of cooperation. He would be remembered as the leader who brought Earth into the fold. It would be a fine addition to his legacy. The doors at the far end of the chamber began to open. Every eye turned toward them. Every conversation stopped. The silence spread across the chamber like a wave. Ambassador Jake Monroe walked through the doors first, but he was not wearing his diplomatic robes. He was wearing a gray military uniform, simple and plain, with 3 silver stars on the collar. His face was calm, but there was something in his eyes that had not been there before. Something hard, something dangerous. Behind him came Admiral Ben Harper, also in uniform, and behind him came more humans, 50 of them, 100, 200. They marched in perfect formation, their boots striking the crystal floor in a rhythm that echoed through the chamber like a heartbeat. Vance walked beside Jake. She carried nothing but a small data crystal in her hand. The humans marched all the way to the center of the chamber, filling the space around the speaking platform. They stood at attention, straight as spears, looking forward. They did not look at the alien species around them. They did not look at the High Speaker on his throne. For a long moment, no one spoke. No one moved. The silence was so complete that you could hear the soft hum of the crystal walls. Then Jake Monroe stepped up to the speaking platform. "High Speaker," he said. His voice was clear and calm, and it carried to every corner of the chamber. "Members of the Galactic Council, thank you for granting us this session." Leaned forward on his throne. His golden eyes were narrow with confusion. This was not what he had expected. This was not what anyone had expected. "Ambassador Monroe," he said carefully, "we are pleased to hear humanity's response to the containment accord. We trust that you have considered the Council's generous terms." Jake smiled. It was a small smile with no warmth in it at all. "We have considered them," he said. "We have thought about little else for the past 3 days. We have discussed them with our leaders on Earth. We have debated their meaning and their consequences." He paused and looked around the chamber. Every face was watching him. Every being was waiting for the words they knew would come. The words of surrender, the words of submission. Jake let them wait. "Before I give you our response," he continued, "I want to tell you a story. It is a story from Earth, from a time long before we traveled among the stars. A time when my people were divided into many nations, always fighting, always struggling for power." The ambassador made a sound of impatience. His mandibles clicked together with annoyance. "We did not come here for stories, human. Speak your surrender and be done with it." Jake ignored him completely. "In that time," he said, "there was a nation that was very powerful. It had the largest army, the most wealth, the most land. And there was a smaller nation nearby that the powerful nation wanted to control. So the powerful nation sent a messenger to the smaller nation with a list of demands. Give up your weapons, pay us tribute, accept our rule, or we will destroy you." The chamber was silent again. Jake's voice was soft now, almost gentle. The smaller nation thought about these demands. They were weak, and the powerful nation was strong. Every logical mind said they should surrender. Every wise advisor said they should accept the terms. Fighting would mean death. Resistance would mean destruction. He paused again. "Do you know what the smaller nation said to the messenger?" No one answered. Jake straightened his spine and lifted his chin. They said one word, just one word. They said no. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. The powerful nation was shocked. They had never been refused before. They sent another messenger with even harsher demands. The smaller nation said no again, and again, and again. They fought wars they could not win. They lost battles they should have survived. They suffered in ways that would have broken any other people. Jake's eyes swept across the chamber, meeting the gaze of species after species. But they did not break. They did not surrender. And in the end, against all logic, against all reason, they survived. They grew. They became the foundation of a civilization that would one day reach the stars. He pointed at the floor beneath his feet. That nation was called Greece. Those people were my ancestors, and the lesson they taught us has lived in human blood for 3,000 years. Vance stepped forward and placed the data crystal on the podium. This crystal contains complete specifications for every ship, weapon, and defense system humanity has developed since we began traveling the stars, Jake said. We give it freely, just as we gave everything else we created during our time here. Confused murmurs rippled through the chamber. This made no sense. Why would they give away their secrets? Jake's smile grew slightly wider. You should study it carefully, he said, because when you do, you will understand something very important, something you should have realized before you made your decision. He leaned forward, and his voice dropped to almost a whisper. But somehow, impossibly, every being in the chamber heard him clearly. You were right to be afraid of us. The murmurs turned to shouts. Species began calling out questions, demanding explanations. The ambassador was on his feet, his armored body trembling with rage. High Speaker raised his arms for silence. When he spoke, his voice was strained. Ambassador Monroe, what is the meaning of this? Jake looked up at him with eyes as cold as the space between stars. The meaning is simple, High Speaker. You voted to cage us. You looked at everything we offered, everything we shared in good faith, and you decided we were too dangerous to be free. He straightened his uniform and stood at attention beside his people. You were absolutely right. We are dangerous, and now you are going to learn exactly how dangerous we can be. Part 4. The chaos in the chamber grew with every passing second. Species were shouting at each other, demanding answers, calling for guards. The ambassador was screaming in his own language, his armored fists pounding against the railing in front of him. Admiral Ben Harper stepped forward and raised one hand. He did not shout. He did not call for silence. He simply stood there with his hand raised as if he had all the time in the universe. Something in his stillness cut through the noise. One by one, the voices fell silent. The chamber grew quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet now. This was the quiet of creatures who suddenly realized they might be in danger. Thank you, Ben said. His voice was rough and deep. I appreciate your attention. I know this is confusing. I know you're scared. You should be. He walked to the center of the speaking platform, his boots loud on the crystal floor. 47 hours ago, while you were debating the containment accord in this very chamber, the Dominion launched a strike fleet toward Earth. 200 warships, the finest vessels in their military. Their mission was simple: capture our before the vote was even finished. The ambassador went very still, his small, dark eyes fixed on Ben Harper with pure hatred. Lies, he hissed, human lies and deception. Ben ignored him. He touched a control on his wrist, and the screens around the chamber flickered to life. This is what remains of that fleet, he said. The images showed 200 warships floating in the darkness of space. They were intact. There was no damage, no burn marks, no debris. They simply hung there dark and silent, their engines cold and their weapons dead. Every ship was disabled simultaneously, Ben continued. Every system shut down at the exact same moment. The crews are alive and unharmed, but their vessels will not move, will not fight, will not even turn on their lights until we allow it." The chamber erupted again. Species were pointing at the screens, crying out in languages too alien to understand. The ambassador was no longer shouting. He was staring at the images with something that looked very much like fear. High Speaker rose from his throne. His voice boomed across the chamber, demanding order. "How?" he demanded. "How is this possible? No technology in the known galaxy can do what you describe." Ben Harper smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "You're right," he said. "No technology in the known galaxy, but you don't know everything about the galaxy, do you? You've been so busy controlling young species that you forgot to keep learning. You became comfortable. You became lazy." He turned to face the council directly. "For 300 years, humanity has been preparing for this moment, not because we knew you would betray us, but because we knew someone eventually would. History taught us that lesson long ago. The strong always try to control the weak. The only solution is to make sure we're never the weak ones." Vance stepped forward with her tablet raised. "We've been inside your system since the first week we arrived," she said. Her voice was calm and professional, as if she was giving a routine report. "Not to harm you, not to steal from you, just to understand." The screens changed. Now they showed schematics of the defense grid around Prime, the impenetrable shield network that protected the Council's seat of power. Red dots appeared on the schematics, one after another, until the entire grid was covered with them. "Every red dot represents a vulnerability we discovered," continued. "Weaknesses in your code, gaps in your sensors, flaws in your design. If we wanted to, we could have brought down your entire defense grid in less than 3 seconds." The silence that followed was absolute. 300 species stared at the screens, seeing their supposedly perfect defenses marked with hundreds of fatal weaknesses. "But we didn't," Jake Monroe said. He stepped forward to stand between Ben and we didn't attack you. We didn't steal from you. We didn't even tell you what we found, because we came here hopping for peace. We came here hopping to be partners." His voice grew harder. "You threw that hope away." He gestured and the screens changed again. This time they showed documents, treaties, agreements, records going back thousands of years. "In the past 40,000 years, the Galactic Council has accepted 43 young species as provisional members," Jake said. "We studied what happened to them. We read the treaties they signed. We saw how their stories ended." The documents scrolled past, names of species that no longer existed, worlds that had been absorbed, cultures that had been erased. 43 times, Jake said softly. 43 peoples who trusted you, who believed your promises of partnership and cooperation, who accepted your generous terms." He pointed at the screens. "None of them remain. Every single one was slowly consumed, their resources taken, their technology, their identities destroyed, and you called it peace." The ambassador found his voice at last. "Those species were inferior," he growled. "They were weak. They could not survive the realities of galactic civilization. That is not our fault." Jake turned to look at him. His eyes were cold as winter. "You're right about one thing," he said. "They were weak. They trusted you and trust made them vulnerable. They believed your lies and belief made them blind." He took a step toward the section of the chamber. "We are not them." The ambassador stepped back without meaning to. The movement was small, but everyone saw it. "We do not trust easily," Jake continued. "We do not believe without proof, and we do not ever assume that someone more powerful has our best interests at heart." He turned back to address the entire council. "You built this civilization on the bones of species you considered inferior. You created a system designed to keep young peoples weak and controlled. You thought you were the masters of the galaxy." He shook his head slowly. "You were wrong." Ben Harper touched his wrist control again. The screens showed the fleet once more, still dark and powerless in the void. In exactly 1 hour, those ships will power back up, he said. Their crews will find themselves alive and healthy. Their weapons will function. Their engines will respond. He paused. But they will also find that every offensive system has been permanently disabled. They will return home with ships that can travel and defend, but never again attack. Consider it a gift from the people of Earth. The chamber was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Jake Monroe straightened his uniform one final time. Humanity did not come to the stars to be consumed, he said. We came to build something better, and if you won't let us build it with you, then we'll build it without you. Part 5. The silence in the council chamber stretched on and on. 312 species sat frozen in their seats, staring at the humans who stood in perfect formation at the center of the room. No one knew what to say. No one knew what to do. Jake Monroe looked around at the faces of beings from 1,000 different worlds. He saw fear in many of them, confusion in others, and in a few, just a few, he saw something that might have been respect. Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council, he announced. His voice was clear and steady. Effective immediately. We reject your containment accord. We reject your authority over our people. We reject your right to decide our future. High Speaker leaned forward on his throne. His golden eyes were wide, and his voice trembled when he spoke. You cannot simply leave, he said. There are procedures, protocols. The Council has never met anyone like us, Jake interrupted. And you made a mistake assuming we would behave like everyone else. He turned to face his people. 200 human officers stood at attention, waiting for his command. These were soldiers and scientists, diplomats and engineers, the best humanity had to offer, and they had come here knowing they might never go home. Marines, Jake said softly, about face. 200 pairs of boots pivoted as one. Now the humans faced the doors at the far end of the chamber, the doors that led out of the Council's realm and back to the stars. Forward march. They moved together, a single body with a single purpose. Their footsteps echoed through the chamber like thunder, like a heartbeat, like a promise. Rose from his throne, his voice rising to a shout. You cannot do this. The full might of the Council will. Jake stopped at the threshold and looked back over his shoulder. Bring it, he said. Then he walked through the doors, and his people followed him, and they did not look back. Behind them, the council chamber exploded into chaos. Species were shouting at each other, blaming each other, demanding that someone do something. The ambassador was calling for immediate military action. The representatives were trying to calm everyone down. It was the worst disorder the chamber had seen in 10,000 years. But not everyone was panicking. In the upper galleries, representatives from smaller species watched the human departure with very different expressions. Some looked thoughtful, some looked hopeful. A few were quietly slipping out through side doors, following the humans at a safe distance. The human delegation marched through the corridors of Prime's central station, past shocked aliens who pressed themselves against the walls to let them pass. No one tried to stop them. No one dared. Their ship was waiting at the dock, engines already warm. As Jake walked up the ramp, he paused to look back at the crystal towers one last time. They were still beautiful, but they meant nothing to him now. The ship lifted off and pushed through the atmosphere, breaking free of the planet's gravity. As soon as they reached open space, they jumped to hyperspace, leaving Prime far behind. It was only then that Jake allowed himself to breathe. Vance found him on the observation deck an hour later. He was standing alone, looking out at the strange colors of hyperspace as they flowed past the windows. We're receiving transmissions, she said quietly. Encrypted channels, 12 species have already reached out. They want to talk. Jake nodded slowly. Which ones? Small nations mostly, the ones who voted against the Accord. The ones who have been watching the council consume their neighbors for generations. She paused. They're scared, Jake, but they're also hopeful. They think maybe we can help them build something new. Can we? Smiled. It was the first real smile he had seen from her in days. I think we can try. Admiral Ben Harper arrived a few minutes later, carrying 3 cups of coffee. It was terrible coffee, made from reconstituted powder, but it was the only coffee they had. They drank it gratefully. The fleet is powering back up, Ben reported. Just like we promised. They're turning around and heading home. I don't think they'll be causing trouble for a while. And the council? Jake asked. Still arguing. They'll probably argue for weeks before they decide what to do about us. By then, it won't matter. We'll have had time to prepare. Jake stared into his coffee cup. The surface of the liquid trembled slightly as the ship moved through hyperspace. You know they'll come eventually, he said. Maybe not the, but someone will decide that humanity needs to be taught a lesson. Someone will send a fleet that's actually prepared for what we can do. Ben nodded. Probably, but that's a problem for tomorrow. Today we survived. Today we walked out of that chamber with our heads held high. That's more than any other young species ever did. Tablet chirped. She looked at it and raised her eyebrows. Another message. This one is from the crystalline minds. They want to know if we would be interested in a formal alliance. Jake almost laughed. The crystalline minds were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They had been part of the council since its founding, and now they were reaching out to the primitive newcomers who had just spat in the council's face. Tell them we're interested, Jake said. Tell them all we're interested, but make it clear we don't want subjects, we don't want servants, we want partners, equals, or nothing at all. Nodded and began typing her response. The ship continued through hyperspace, carrying its precious cargo of humans toward home. Behind them, the Galactic Council tried to understand what had just happened. Ahead of them, Earth waited with open arms, proud of the sons and daughters who had refused to surrender. And across the galaxy, in quiet corners and hidden places, species who had long ago given up hope began to whisper a new word. A word in a strange, alien language. A word that meant something like freedom and something like defiance and something like the promise of a better future. The word was human. Jake Monroe stood at the window and watched the stars blur past. He thought about everything they had lost, the chance for peaceful cooperation, the friendship they had tried to build, the dream of a galaxy united. Then he thought about everything they had gained, their freedom, their dignity, their future. They thought we were just another species to consume, he said quietly. They forgot the most important thing about humans. Ben looked at him, waiting. Jake turned from the window. His eyes were bright with determination. We don't break, he said. We adapt, we survive, and we never ever forget. He raised his coffee cup in a silent toast to the stars. Welcome to the new galaxy. Things are about to get very interesting.